Welcome to this little intro video for a longer video that's going to come after this, about 20-minute long video. But I wanted to give you a little bit of context first for what the video is that's coming up. And that is a video on subplot self-assessment, which is a module, part of a module in a self-directed class that I have called Build Your Book, which is a class designed to help novelists and creative nonfiction writers literally build their books, building out all of their chapters, chapter by chapter, and also the core scenes they need within each chapter to set themselves up for being ready to actually write manuscript pages. It's a very cool little class, but I wanted to share this one particular module, make it free and available to the public without having to purchase the whole class, because it shows you what the class is a little bit about, but it also talks about a topic, subplots, which isn't talked about very much in the creative writing world, especially for novelists and creative nonfiction writers. And I think it's got a lot of just cool information that I think will be beneficial for you if you're not familiar really with what a subplot is or how they work or how you can make them work, how they're structured and so on. This little self-assessment piece is part of the first module of Build Your Book, which is a self-assessment process to assess where the writer is in their development process before they start actually building out their chapters. You can't do this class or build out your book unless you've got the core story structure and core story development pieces in fairly good order. And so the self-assessment module is the very first module in the class, sets you up to examine 6 or 7 very particular development areas of your process to make sure that you're set up for success. If they're lacking, well, it talks about how you can shore them up and fix them. So, like I said, story subplots is one of those assessment tools, and that's what this video is, because this is not a topic that's talked about very much in the creative writing world. And I think there's just a lot of very cool information here, and it gives you a good introduction to the idea of subplots, and you can explore that more in my writings and in my other classes. I have a whole class on subplots, but this will give you a lot of good information like what a subplot is, how it works, how it's structured, and so on. So that's the context. That's where this video is coming from. So sit back and relax and enjoy the video. Welcome to Module 1, the subplot assessment. So this is an unusual topic for most people when it comes to story development because they're not used to doing subplots. I did an informal poll, I guess, of a bunch of famous novelists and friends of mine who are very successful novelists. And I asked them, how do you guys how do you plan your subplots? Almost every single one of them, without exception, said, they don't even think about them. They just, if they happen, they happen. They're happy accidents. That's their general approach to subplotting in novel writing and memoir writing. And while this can work for really talented writers, for average people who are just kind of learning how to write, and even experienced writers who haven't given any thought to this, it's not a very effective approach. Just kind of let it kind of happen if it happens. It's a very creative writing community-esque kind of mythology that they're following. The stories just write themselves. Subplots just write themselves. No, they really don't. So I have a very particular approach to subplots, what they are, what they're not, how you build one. And there's an entire class, obviously, that I teach on this called the Story Subplot Connection. This isn't covered in either Anatomy of a Premise Line or Rapid Story Development, although I think there will be a chapter on subplots and the new edition of Anatomy of a Premise Line coming out next year sometime. But as I said in an earlier video, that's not going to help you right now. So what I'm going to share with you, I'm not going to go into a whole bunch of gory detail about what a subplot is or isn't and all that kind of stuff. We're going to focus mostly on the worksheets that you can use to develop a subplot, because you need subplots in your book. Subplots are essential pacing tools. It's not enough just to control the speed of the sentence with word choices and syntax and or paragraphs. That's pacing of a kind for sure, but what really paces a novel or a longer work of long fiction or creative nonfiction is character development. Do you have your structure really cause and effect and all the story beats in place and things are moving forward? Do you have your subplots properly placed and how you're breaking out of your A line into your B line, going back to the A line? Are they happening in the optimal places in the story? That's real pacing. That's what I call commercial pace. So I'm going to go over the worksheets that are involved in some of that and show you a couple of examples, just so you can get a little bit lay of the land on how to work with these worksheets and developing subplots for your story. Now, there are some stories that are like very heavily genre-based, things like that, like Jurassic Park, right? I don't think there are any subplots in that book. I think it's just all dinosaurs killing people, and that's pretty much all it is. In the Andromeda Strain, there's no real subplots in that book, as far as I know. It's that I remember. It's just pretty much, going into wildfire and trying to find out what the damn thing is, and then killing it. That's it. There's no real subplot development going on because the A-line story is so much fun. The A-line story is so interesting. It can hold people's attention for that long. It's when you get into very long books that you have to have subplots, like Song of Ice and Fire by George R. R. Martin. Gotta have subplots in that thing. We've got thousands and thousands and thousands of pages. You can't just always be in the A-line story. So let's talk a little bit about what distinguishes a subplot from just a vignette, because this is what most people do in their books. They've got the term subplot means subordinate plot, thus sub, okay? Subplot. Subordinate to what? The A-line story. Subplots exist only at service to the main line story. If they don't serve the A-line story, they're just barnacles on the fin. They don't serve any purpose other than your artistic, musy self, which is okay, but it's not going to help tell the story necessarily. You might want to go off on some great historical tangent because history is really fascinating. Okay, but the message you're sending to your reader is, okay, everybody, we're going to stop telling the story and we're going to go off and we're going to do this now. And then when you're done with that, you go, okay, everybody, we're done with this disconnected thing. We're going to go back to the main story now. The reader's going to, if you do that enough, you're going to disconnect your reader from all tension that you've been building, all character development you've been building. The story's going to just go. It's like watching a tennis match, right? And some readers will tolerate it, but a lot of readers are just going to go, oh, God, they don't know what they're doing. Then they'll close the book and they won't come back to it. So those are when people are doing what's called episodic writing. Episodes. Character goes here, does this, comes up against this problem, solves it. Okay, next problem. Okay, now I'm going to solve this problem. Totally disconnected problems. Totally disconnected topics. But you've got these little episodic or vignettes going from spot to spot to spot to spot. And they don't ever touch each other in any real way. That's classic episodic writing. Makes your pacing incredibly choppy and uneven. To avoid that, to make your middle not mushy, which is the next section in this module, the last section, you need a clear through line held together by a protagonist who has a very clear desire line, off of which everything is falling and being supported like a clothesline. And you need subplots that help ratchet up tension and release tension along the way. You're tense in A line, you get to a big beat, you leave that story, you go to something else, the subplot. And that subplot relieves a little tension, but then starts building new tension because now you got another little story going on. They're completely unrelated on the surface. They don't look like they have anything to do with one another. They'll involve some of the same characters that are in your book, obviously, but they're dealing with different problems, different stuff. They're not dealing with the same murder mystery. They're not dealing with the same alien invasion. They've got other things going on that will eventually, near the end of the book, as late as you can get into the book, resolve as a plot all by itself. And we're going to see how they're structured in a second. But the resolution of that subplot will fold back in to the A-line story and affect a choice, a decision, a piece of information, an action the protagonist is going to take in the A-line that they would never have thought of doing or entertained had that subplot not occurred. And that will change the trajectory of the A-line story. That's a subplot. Subplots change the trajectory of the A-line story. TV shows do this all the time, all day long. Every episode of every good TV show has at least 3 storylines going in competition. And they all end up dovetailing in some way and affecting the mainline story and the protagonist or the star of the show. In every season, you've got this going on. Every season. TV writers do this beautifully well. Okay. But they learned that from where? The Penny Dreadfuls. Penny Dreadful writers in the 1800s and early 1900s. That's who did this first. Okay. So that's what we're going to go and talk a bit about now. So that's kind of the very high level explanation about what a subplot is and why you need them. It's for pacing. It's for pacing and creating more dramatic tension in your story. And when you have a 400-page book or a 300-page book, you can't just be with the murder mystery every chapter. Chances are you need to break away, give your reader a little relief, but not really, because you're throwing them into a new problem they've got to now jump into and learn about. And then you can come back to this one. You pick it up where you left off. And it's a very powerful way to create dramatic tension. Okay, so there is a worksheet. It's a subplot worksheet. We're not going to go into super detail. You'll have to study it kind of on your own if you're not going to be doing any classes or anything. But do the best you can. But this is the subplot worksheet. Now, it works off of my book, Rapid Story Development, Chapter 13, where I do talk a little bit about subplots there. The subplot reference document, don't worry about that. That has to do with different patterns of subplots, okay? But we don't have to get into that here. As with all worksheets, everything can be told briskly in 1 or 2 lines of text. You want to avoid backstory, exposition, explanations, descriptions, feeling, thoughts, blah, blah, blah. Just the facts, ma'am. Okay? The one subplot you've got to have is that B line. That's an important subplot. It's not just going to be, Aunt Tizzy and Uncle Joe go off to the store to buy some moonshine. No, it's got to be a really engaging, interesting subplot storyline. Okay? The other ones can be a little less engaging, a little less dramatic or sexy, but the B line's got to really pop. Okay, so you got to think about that line, and it cannot cover the same dramatic material as the A line story. If it's the alien invasion, they're in the alien invasion, obviously, but they can't. Their problem they're trying to solve, and we're going to get into structure in a second, can't be the same problem as the A line. Then it's just a tributary off the A-line. It's not really a subplot. It's just a little tangent off the A-line story. Okay. So here we're doing the B-line. You identify the POV character. Every subplot has a POV character, just like your mainline story has a point of view character, the protagonist. Every subplot has a protagonist. Maybe it's the same character. Maybe it is the POV character. If you're writing your book in first person, it's going to be the protagonist. They're going to be the POV character for everything because it's a first-person narrative. Very hard to write. I don't know where these people get the idea that first person. Oh, that's where beginning writers should really start, is first person, because that's the easiest one to write. It's the hardest one to write. It's incredibly hard to write well. So if you've got a third person omniscient or close third or second person, you want the POV character typically to be a supporting character line. Okay, so we're talking about somebody who's in the life of the protagonist, but isn't a major player in the A-line story. Or maybe they are a major player. Maybe they're the lover. Maybe they're a very important character. Then you look at the subplot central opponent. So are you seeing a little bit of a correlation here between the structure of the classic structure and subplots? Yes, they're structured the same. They're stories, little stories within the story. So you've got a POV character, and that character wants something. That character is going to be opposed by someone or some force who's going to stop them and be the pushback in the subplot. So you'll have that central character, that central opponent character. Then state what the goal is. What in that chapter, what in that subplot does the character want? What are they going to be after over all the pages you're going to be doing the subplot? And subplots they're usually like 5, 6, 7 chapters, maybe. Everybody's different, but just generally know you're not going to have 50 chapters of a subplot. There's a central conflict for the subplot. What are they fighting about and over? Okay, this is the central conflict. It has an inciting incident, just like your main storyline, and it has a midpoint complication, just like your main storyline. And I ask a lot of the same questions here about, okay, well, what are the stakes? Do you know them? Etc. Identify them. There's a doom moment in the subplot as well. There's absolutely a final battle and a resolution. Okay, so there's the same basic structure. You can sometimes get away in a subplot with missing some of these as long as they're maybe implied in the background. But generally, you're going to hit a lot of the same milestones in the subplot you're going to hit in the mainline story. But the distinguishing factor is this very last one, the A-line impact. How does the subplot resolution fold back and change the trajectory of the main line? It's all plot, by the way. It's all plot. If it's a character beat moment, okay, that works too. But 9 times out of 10, it's going to be something in the action line is going to happen that's going to change the A-line story. Alrighty? So that is what the worksheet looks like. Let's look at a quick example. From The Corner Boys, which is the synopsis that I gave you in the earlier section, the last section. This is from that story. We're not going to go through each of these beats, but I want you to, when you download this, reread The Corner Boys, and then go through and see how these questions are being answered. And you'll see all the stuff in the synopsis is present here that relate to the A-line. But this is a very particular subplot going on behind the scenes of the A-line story in Corner Boys. A battle between one of the mainline characters and his father in a Japanese internment camp. And see how this builds. See how these questions are answered and how it all resolves. The relationship resolves and everything goes on. And they're dealing with something completely different outside of the mainline conflict. They have their own conflict going on. But when it resolves, it changes the mainline story by freeing up Rabbit, the POV character for the subplot, in such a way that he can now participate in the A-line in a very significant way that changes what's going to happen to the protagonist. And actually everyone in the story. Okay, and so that comes back as a pure subplot. Okay, now the other thing I want you to think about and look at, and you'll have this to download as well, is Remember I talked about weaving in subplots into the mainline A-line story synopsis. Here's an example of that. That B subplot that I just described, I weaved into this earlier synopsis example I gave you in the earlier module for Corner Boys. And this is how you do it. A-line's all black. Purple is the B line. You color code your subplots as you put them through, and that shows you where your pacing is moving. You see how things are spread out. Goes into the A line again. Comes into the B line, goes into the A line, etc., etc., etc. You just play with this over and over and over again until you get all the right beats in all the right places. It takes time. It takes time. That's okay. You got it. But that's what I'm talking about in terms of layering in all the different subplots to get that long synopsis that then you can use to jump in to the real work of this mini course, which is to build the chapters. Okay, I know this module is very long, but it's really important that you're set up for success here. You've got to have this stuff in place if you're going to be successful with this. Okay, so that's how subplots work. You've got the resources, you've got the worksheets, you've got the examples, and I think it'll make sense in terms of how you move forward with this. The next module is on the mushy middle. That's mostly just a video I want you to watch, which explains all about how the mushy middle stops being mushy. And it's just a general informative thing for you that I think it's important for you to understand how all of this fits into how you organize and build the middle of your novel or your memoir or creative nonfiction work. This video is also on my YouTube channel, and you can watch it there as well, but I'm including it here in this class. Okay, so I will see you when we get into the mushy middle.